So I have a question. So to give people some context, maybe 2013, Obama retired the public space program, right? That's kind of what led Elon to be able to have such success with the Falcon 9. So 2017-ish time frame, that's when he starts launching and landing these Falcon 9 rockets. You've experienced that obviously for 3 years at that point. You said, man, I have the ability to get into this at ground floor. And since then, obviously, you alluded to Starlink is launched, Spaceship is launched. They've looked at a lot of different other avenues as well. Last year, 2022, their revenue of SpaceX was about 4.6 billion. I think this year they climbed to about the mid $8 billion range. I'm not 100% sure on the profitability of that. I'm not sure if you get statements and if you can divulge any of that. But do you see any other company out there with the work that you've done, with what you've been able to experience in SpaceX and what you've been able to see achieve? Do you see any other companies out there that are, let's just say, even a couple years behind? Obviously, it takes time to develop a cadence and pace as to what we observe. We obviously didn't see SpaceX launch 100 Falcon 9s in year one, right? We saw them launch a couple, but you got to walk before you can run. And now, obviously, the Falcon 9 is sprinting pretty much at this point. But do you see any inklings of, obviously, Astra's going under at this point in terms of, I mean, maybe they'll switch to space systems rather than launch, but I still think they're hoping for an Astra 4. You've seen Virgin Orbit go under. Not Galactic, that's still up and running for now, even though they just continue to kind of what's the word I'm looking for, dilute shareholders with respect to that. But then you also have Relativity, which was a big thing that was a big fundraiser. I think they raised a decent amount at a $5 billion valuation not too long ago. It was like 2-3 years ago.
It was 4.2 billion, I remember, if correctly, on relative to space, because I mean, I was working for a PEVC fund that time. I mean, I saw the data room and we made the investment. So yeah.
So that delivered the Terran 1, and then they immediately retired after that relative success that they had with the Terran 1, and are now developing the Terran R, which I think is supposed to be launching in 25, if I remember. So you don't have somebody, in my opinion, with the cadence of, say, a Rocket Lab, but I feel like maybe a ULA, but even ULA doesn't necessarily have the cadence of a Rocket Lab, but they are kind of apples and oranges, as the ULA vehicles are much larger and they're able to launch a larger payload than, say, an Electron. But I guess your perspective, being somebody that's been involved now, I guess, going in your 4th year, who is a close competitor? And I mean, US focused, right? Obviously, China has their own sort of programs that are doing relatively well. We've seen India have their programs that are doing really well. But I guess from like a US perspective, US ability to invest and potentially take part in all of this that's going on and the growing economy that we see for space, who's doing really well? And it doesn't necessarily have to be specific to launch. It could be space systems. It doesn't have to be Astra and all them. It could be Redwire. It could be Planet Lab. It could be all that.
So in order to answer that, and I have a very clear opinion on that, but I think let me frame the field for that. I think if you want to understand the winner or the second winner or who is the closest, it's important to understand what's the landscape look like. Okay. So traditional landscape, which was driven by NASA and European Space Agency, that's where these were like high cost, slow moving kind of, but I mean, they had a technical excellence in their own way. I think the challenges of Russia, okay, what we call like I mean, their problem is not the engineering. Their problem is they just don't have money, and they don't have that kind of like a political alignment and kind of like strategic positioning at this particular time. Okay, so they all are good. They all have a lot of engineering part, but when we are talking like in terms of cost efficiency and all that, I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, Europe is to me is the fastest declining force when it comes on a space force. You can see what is happening with Ariane. So it's fair to say that in Western world or in superpower or old superpower worlds, the government led space program is a force that is weakening. So that is one part. The second part is, okay, the emerging space, like, okay, when you talk about like China and India, okay, China and India has a lot of invested in their space programs, okay, but both programs are still driven by government, okay, both are very cost efficient, and but they are still government driven program. Their mandate is different, they work in a certain pace, and even if doesn't matter how efficient they will become, I mean, US is never going to give a satellite to China to launch, even if it is launching at 1/10 the price. So there are like barriers in the space industries. I mean, yeah, that will just, I mean, it doesn't matter how efficient you are, but where you are will. So that, again, when you talk about US focus, that means that is whatever happening there is of no use. Then there is a certain point of pride also in US. Like if US has to give a satellite for Japan to launch, okay, there are people in NASA. I mean, the US pride will say, like, man, this is not what we expected it to be, even though the Japan is an alliance. So that is, these are like soft factor. Now let us come on to the private part. The private space sector, I mean, you have companies which has big supporter and big money, and this is where SpaceX comes in. This is where Blue Origin comes in. Okay, and then you have in the private, you have people who have been there. Okay, Boeing has been there. I mean, all the defense prime who have built together the Unite ULA. Now the challenge is that we have seen enough evidence at this point. While ULA has very deep tentacles in defense and in, I mean, in NASA, and they have cut, I mean, a lot of time grace for them. They are just not able to deliver at the pace which is needed. Okay, so they are good, but they are struggling in their own ways. Okay, Blue Origin
And
we already
before you
discussed.
move on, before you move on to that piece, do you think it is because it's a joint venture? It's not as profitable as maybe Northrop and Boeing wanted it to be. Do you have an opinion as to why?
I have to be very blunt here. They are not mission driven. Okay, I mean, when you have like, see, this is an area where you have to push frontier. You have to take losses. You have to be aggressive. I mean, we have seen, all are seeing what is happening in Boeing. The culture is just not there. There is a culture of excellence, but that kind of a culture is not driven by corporate. There is individual excellence that is driving these programs in these companies. And again, I'm saying this as an outsider based on evidence I see. There's no mission. If your mission is just to launch Starline, and no, I mean, like if you talk to Elon mission is to go to Mars. Okay, what was the mission in 60s for US to go to moon? So you need to have that kind of mission if you are going to push frontier, unless it just become a checklist and another job that you do. Okay, so going back to our discussion, and then you come to these companies where you have Astra, where you have Rocket Lab, where you have Relativity Space, and small companies. We saw recently there was a launch happened in Japan. And there have been many companies which are buried in the space industries. A lot of people have started. It's not like these are the first time. Many people started space companies even before that. But why those companies failed? Because they never able to build a launch system. And that is a key differentiation. So if you go into the space industry, private space industry, you will see a lot of players who were never able, who went bankrupt because they were never able to build a launch system. Okay, people have also tried satellite in space for internet, but they were not able to do it and went bankrupt because they were not able to do it at a price point which is competitive. Okay, now you looked at the group, so of Rocket Lab, Astra, and Relativity Space, who has the most competent and consistent launch system? It is Rocket Lab. Astra has done too. We saw Astra went public with 2.1, and now I think recently they were sold by the founders by like 11 or 27 million. Okay, so because this is fucking rocket engineering, you really need something that works. Okay, and then you talk about Relativity Space. I mean, they have a different approach for 3D printing for rockets and everything, which is, if works, can be very good in terms of time and all that. And if you see now, so check about what Rocket Lab actually has a mission that says, okay, this is how we are going to launch 100 rockets per year. Okay, ULA doesn't have that mission. China and ISRO doesn't have that mission. Only SpaceX has that mission. Okay, and the kind of price point they are doing it, okay, their technology is smart. So for example, if you see their orbital reusable rocket, they do not have a funky system like SpaceX has. They have like what we call like a makeshift system. It is coming with a parachute, then you flew the chopper, but it works. So they are like street smart, what I would call. They have two different launch systems. They have contract with NASA. So they literally became to a point where they have a system that works. Okay, and their system works more often than any other player in that space except SpaceX. Their launch success ratio is far cheaper than what UL and European agency does. Okay, the rocket is small, so that means they can build a lot. It's very repetitive in a way. Okay, so the rocket lab, to me, the biggest surprise is that why these people actually went public. They shouldn't have gone public, in my opinion, because once you are public in an industry which is cash guzzling, as a public company, it is very difficult to raise capital at times, especially when you are this kind of cash guzzling. So that is what people don't. So let us take the case of Astra. Astra went public with 2.1 billion kind of a valuation. Astra did 5 launches, 2 were successful. Okay, so they have a system that works, but it's not as competent, it's not as reliable. Okay, and Astra went from 2.1 to 11 or 27 million. Okay, that means they still have to build a pipeline. They're still not commercial enough, and they still don't have. So that is, to me, okay, let's say if world goes upside down on Rocket Lab, at least Rocket Lab will not go to 27 million kind of a scenario, because they have a working system. How many people would like to have that working system? Tomorrow Google want to build a competition to Starlink. They have tried in past building with their balloons and all that. Facebook tried in past. Amazon says they want to do in Kuiper. From where Amazon is going to launch? They said they will use ULA. They will said they will use New Glenn. I mean, let's be realistic. They will need a low cost system. OneWeb recently did. They launched their satellites with ISRO. Okay, I mean, ISRO has their own pipeline. India has their own aggressive demand on ISRO. How many ISRO will launch for them? So either OneWeb doesn't build that kind of a. Is SpaceX going to be the only LEO satellite internet? No, there are going to be 5-6 players. So who are they going to use to launch? Because it's all about, like I said, companies in past have gone bankrupt doing this because they never got the price point right. Okay, I mean, how do you get the price point right? You get the price point right by launching it cheaper. If you are launching a solution which is going against a Starlink using a SpaceX, I mean, actually you're funding your competition. It's embarrassing for you, no? And we know how the Wall Street CEOs work. So that is not going to happen. So when you put all these things together, so Rocket Lab has a very good price point and very good reliability when it comes to capture this market. The Rocket Lab challenge is because they're already a public company. Okay, so for them to turn into a free cash flow, they have to take a very different trajectory what SpaceX has done. They have to become a very service driven. Like, okay, first I need to service with what I have. Only then I have excess money. I keep investing it back. So it's going to be very different. Okay, which is not bad. Okay, because the SpaceX has expanded market so much, and Elon has pissed off so many people that people need something which is non-SpaceX but in space.
So I think what Sachin is kind of referring to here is obviously there's a lot of players that kind of started off. Not all of them have been successful. You have to basically price everything appropriately. Some people have done decent, some people haven't, and obviously it's now getting to a place where you're consolidating, right? There's people that have not necessarily been successful. Those people are falling out. Adam Spice has talked about this quite frequently in a lot of their discussions, as well as Peter Beck. They're basically going to end up being a handful of players, whether that's small launch or just launch in general, whether that's medium launch as well, because Rocket Lab will be entering that space in the next 12 months. Eventually there's going to be enough people that fall out of favor. ULA is trying to sell themselves as it is. Who knows if that's going to be successful in a sale or if they end up closing shop and continues to further consolidate. And that's been one of the tried and true methods that NASA and many other players have had to use over the past few years. But as you kind of stated, I mean, depending upon who is happy with each other, you definitely need to have 2 or 3 different people that are successful, because obviously NASA wants to continue to fund folks and get things down cheaper every single day. So you won't just fund SpaceX, because obviously then they'll be the sole player and then they can kind of dictate, the price point. But obviously if you have Rocket Lab, you have Firefly, you have many other folks, you have this opportunity to continue to pit them against each other, bid, and try to make sure that margins are in an appropriate manner for both obviously the private as well as the public market. Did I hit everything that
No, I
you
think
kind of
that's
stated?
yeah, I think that's very good. So let me just go back to that. So see, Rocket Lab. So space economy has expanded. You need players to launch this LEO, what we call like low Earth orbit satellites. Okay, you have to launch these satellites at a very low price point. There is no company outside SpaceX has capacity or promise that can do it at scale other than Rocket Lab. Period. Not ULA, not European, whatever anybody says. There is no other company that can actually build that scale. Okay, so as long as you have belief that companies will go and launch LEO satellites, because now the market is open, and they want to do it cheaply because they are against a very strong competition in terms of Starlink, in terms of price and quality. They really need some strong player to help them. And whether it's ULA, whether it's Blue Horizon, whether it's European Space Agency, whether it's Astra, whether it's Relativity Space, when you see in terms of capacity and in terms of promise and in terms of reliability, they don't match Rocket Lab with whatever limited uh, track record Rocket Lab has built. And Rocket Lab is very mission driven. So yes, Rocket Lab, in my opinion, is not SpaceX, but Rocket Lab is Rocket Lab, and they are going after, and they should go after a market which is very unique to them. So that is part one. The second part is a company with this kind of niche and this kind of positioning can struggle but will not go out of business, because the companies that have gone out of business, they never able to build a reliable launch system. They never able to build a very cost efficient launch system, which it already has. So if the company struggle, somebody will come and acquire it. So that is something which is very unique. So that's what I say a lot of time, Rocket Lab will not go bankrupt. Okay, because you have something which a lot of people need. I mean, Google will come and buy them, Facebook can come and buy them. Okay, I mean, for them throwing 2 billion is literally nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, the thing which Rocket Lab will struggle is because they are in public and they need money and they will raise capital. And I mean, we want to, and the market treats Rocket Lab like it's a services company in IT. That's not true. Okay, I mean, this company is expected to raise capital. So as long as they are delivering on ROIC, their capital raise should be seen positive for the company and stock, in my opinion. Okay, if you can turn $1 into $10, and you are borrowing $1 at a price of $2, I mean, it's a net addition in general. So it's a space industry. Okay, somebody who has technical prowess is supposed to be very different. So this is where I always consider that I think Rocket Lab probably should have stayed private for longer. Okay, it would have been easier for them. I mean, it's good for retail investors that you have a company like this, but it comes with a different kind of challenges. I think so to me, what is the milestone that will be make or break for Rocket Lab? Okay, I do not expect company to be very free cash flow positive, but I do expect this company to partner with another company, like we discussed about low earth orbit kind of an opportunity, where somebody comes and say, okay, we want you to, we are buying 25 launches of you. And the moment that happens, and it will happen in my opinion, okay, to me that's the biggest milestone, that somebody comes and somebody says, okay, we have played across the spectrum from ULA, from Ariane and everything. Okay, you are probably the best, and we want to do it at scale because we want to capture the piece of space economy. Companies will eventually come and tell them, you are buying 10 of your rockets, we are buying 15 of your rockets, and that's where the turning point for this company will come.
Do you think that that has to be Neutron, their medium launch vehicle, or is it just Electron in general?
I think it will start with Electron, in my opinion. See, if you see the case of Starship, it has shown promise. It's not successful yet. Yes, a variant of it is a part of Artemis program because people believe SpaceX can deliver. Same will happen with Rocket Lab.